So we're really going to get started now. So as I was saying, I was trying to figure out how I was going to combine kind of the story of my career and something technical. So I ended up with a really long, rambly title, but I think it's going to work in the end. So this is how fighting, flaunting, and improvising led me to graph databases. So let me just take a minute and introduce myself. So I'm a new mom. That's my baby girl there in the picture, and my husband, Jason. She was a couple months old there. She's now about 7 months old, so she's a bit spunkier and more awake. But I absolutely love her. She's a doll. Her name is Sydney. I worked for IBM for 6 years full-time before I had Sydney, and then I took about 6.5 months off, and I just came back September 1st as a part-time software engineer. So it's working really well for me. I work 2 days a week, and I'm going to start building up slowly back to full-time. But I love it because it makes me really appreciate my time with her on my days off, and then on my days back to work, I appreciate getting to stretch my mind and taking a little break away from the crying. So that's working out well for me right now. Also, I'm an inventor, which is something that I never thought I would do, but I had 4 patents issued over the summer, which I just thought was a really cool thing. So never say no, never close any doors, because it's amazing what you can do. As I mentioned, this is my home office. I work from home in Delaware. I love working from home for a couple of different reasons. One, I worked in the office in Cubeland for about a year, and it just wasn't for me. I didn't like not having a window. I had to keep, I couldn't play music out loud, so I love working from home because I've got lots of bright sunshine during the day. I can play my music as loud as I want. Another big perk from working from home is we've moved a couple times for my husband's job, and I've been able to keep my same job, not have to look for a new job, which is awesome. And then the third reason, which I've discovered just recently, is I'm still breastfeeding my baby, so I'm able to pump breast milk during the day without having to haul a pump around. I can keep working. I don't have to go to a special room, and I've got my own, my home fridge, so it's a much easier process. So I really like the work arrangement I have right now. So that's a little bit about who I am right now, and I kind of just want to step back and tell you a little bit about my story and also some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. So when I was in middle school, the internet was just starting to come into people's houses as like a normal thing. Now I know you guys are all, used to the internet, but when I got the internet at home, I just thought it was so cool. I loved kind of browsing around the internet, looking at web pages, and I thought I really want to figure out how to do that. So at the time, you didn't just browse the internet to learn how to do things. I actually went to a bookstore and I bought HTML for Dummies, and I decided I was just going to figure it out. And I absolutely loved the coding. I liked that, whatever I did, I typed it out in Notepad and then it would just show up. And I liked just being able to edit the code and see the visual display right away. For my Girl Scout Gold Awards, it's kind of similar to the Boy Scout Eagle Scout Award. I decided I was going to take the web design to the next level, and I created a professional level website for a local preservation society. So I used what at the time were really hot tools, Flash and Dreamweaver, and I built this website, and I thought it was really cool. So it was time for me to go to college. We were like, okay, what am I going to major in? So my dad was like, well, Lauren, you're good at math. You like building websites. You should do computer science. And I had no idea that computer science is more than that. I didn't really know what computer science was, but it sounded good. So I went to NC State, go Wolfpack, and decided to study computer science. So I had my first level Java course, and there were people from all different majors in the class. So there were girls, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I had never done any programming before. I remember in the class being totally confused by just like the assignment operators. So I remember like var x equals y, and I remember asking the TA, I don't understand. X is not actually equal to y. Why are we putting that in there? Like I just didn't even understand the basic concepts of programming, and I felt pretty behind. But I was able to survive Java 1, and I moved on to Java 2. And Java 2 is where a lot of the different engineering programs kind of veer off, and it was just computer science people. So I was sitting in my class, and people were starting to filter in, and I was looking around, and I was like, wow, there are a lot of guys in this class. And they keep filtering in, and more guys, and slowly but surely, I realized I was the only girl in the classroom. And it was totally strange. I had no idea that computer science had been so typically male dominated. And I was like, wow, this is a little strange. And I felt very behind. I asked a lot of questions in class. I didn't really know what I was doing. I went to TA's office hours all the time. I asked my classmates for help. And I just kind of struggled, but I kind of figured it out as I got going. I figured it out. And I remember about midway through the class, we had like our midterm exam, and I studied really hard and ended up getting a high A on it. And I remember the guys kind of looking over at my grade and going, "Oh my gosh, she got an A," and I had done better than a lot of the guys around me. And they were shocked because they had all been very confident. Um, so I had studied hard and I worked really hard, and I actually figured it out. And a lot of the time I kind of felt like I didn't belong, like I felt like I was a little bit of a fraud, that I was just kind of getting there because I was working hard, but I didn't actually have the skills to do it. And it turns out that that has a name, so I wanted you guys just to be familiar with it, and it's called imposter syndrome. And you guys are already programming, you're doing awesome things, so hopefully you feel very confident and this never hits you. But if it does, I just want you to be aware that it's normal, it's common, and there are other people who feel the same way you do. So this is the only slide in the whole deck I'm going to read, but I think it's important for you to hear, so I'm going to read it aloud. So imposter syndrome, also known as imposter phenomenon or fraud syndrome, is a term coined in 1978 by clinical psychologists Dr. Pauline R. Clance and Suzanne A. Imes, referring to high-achieving individuals marked by an inability to internalize their accomplishments and a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. Despite external evidence of their competence, those exhibiting the syndrome remain convinced that they are frauds and do not deserve the success they have achieved. So this is something that I still come across, throughout my career. I've gone, oh my gosh, people are going to realize that I don't really know what I'm doing. So I try to actively fight that feeling. So who gets the imposter syndrome? It's common among high achievers, which seems a little backwards. Like if you are a high achiever, you would think you'd have the confidence to go with it, but that's not necessarily true. And Wikipedia also describes that women and African Americans sometimes fall in imposter syndrome as well. And it's because sometimes we feel like maybe we got our spot to hit a diversity check or an affirmative action type thing. I know that's something that I felt. I got into the IBM Extreme Blue internship, which is super competitive, and I always kind of thought that I got it because I was a woman. And that just kind of was in the back of my head, and I learned later after the internship was over, like, no, I didn't make it because I was a woman. No matter what, everybody has to hit the same technical interview. You have to pass it. But because I felt like maybe I got there because of charm or because I was a woman, I didn't really internalize that success. So I think it's important just to think about, what you've accomplished and really try to internalize that yourself. I'm always amazed at the end of the year when I have to write up, what I achieved for my manager for our interview reviews. I go, wow, I really got some cool stuff done this year. And then, it's a few weeks later and it starts to fade, my memory fades. So try to actively fight it. Hopefully you guys are super confident and you don't hit it. But if you feel that way, just know that you're not alone. The other thing I want you guys to know is that the confidence gap is real. So if you have time, there's this really great article. It's super long. We've got the link here. But there's studies that show that men tend to overestimate their abilities while women underestimate them. So throughout my undergrad, I commonly felt like I didn't belong. The guys around me seemed to just know so much more than I did. And eventually I asked them, I was like, how do you guys know all this stuff? And it turns out a lot of them would just read like a little paragraph, a little article, and act like they knew everything about the topic when really they just had a very high level surface understanding. They had an overconfidence in their abilities. So I try to keep this in mind for myself, that maybe they don't always have a super deep understanding. They're just displaying a lot more confidence than I have. And I also try to keep this in mind when I'm picking partners or teammates, that somebody's displayed confidence may not necessarily reflect how much they actually know. So I made it through undergrad. I decided to go on to grad school, and I graduated with a master's degree in computer science, and I decided to start at IBM in 2009 full-time. So I was on my team, and I began looking around, and I was like, wow, I don't really look like everybody else. I don't have the same hobbies as everybody else, and I don't have like the same natural skill sets because my hobbies are different. And I was like, oh, this is bad, when you start comparing yourself to others. But eventually I started to really embrace it. So much of career advancement is based on making sure that other people know what you've accomplished. They know what you know. So if you are a little different, you can really use that to your advantage. I've been amazed when I go to conferences. People say, oh, you're the girl who made that DevOps tutorial. I know who you are, right? And I didn't even know who they were. So if you're able to be memorable, use that to your advantage. So a few years ago, my team needed somebody to take over their social media accounts, and they knew that I like doing Facebook in my free time on my personal accounts. They said, Lauren, you want to try to do our social media? And I said, yes. And so, that was a natural skill set that I had that many of my other teammates did not have. So really use it to your advantage. If you've got different hobbies, different skill sets, use them to your advantage and be memorable. I also want to encourage you to be bold. A few years ago, my manager sent an email out to our whole team, and she said, I want you guys to start going to conferences. We need to be talking to developers at conferences. And I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds terrifying. Like, public speaking is so scary. But I decided I was going to give it a shot. So I was skimming through her list of conferences we should go to, and I saw a conference in London, and I thought, that sounds amazing. I'd never been to Europe. Yes, let's do that. So I applied. I talked with the people who were organizing the conference, and they said, I don't really like this idea that you kind of came up with, but let's see if we can figure something else out. So we collaborated. We found a topic that we thought the conference attendees would be interested in, and I went. I was so scared. My voice was shaking. It was a tiny room of maybe, 40 people, and I was terrified, but I made it through. I thought, okay, I can do this. So gradually over time, I started speaking at more conferences, building up the size of the rooms I was speaking in, that sort of thing. And I've been able to speak all over the U.S. I don't know, the green dots are probably really small where on the screen you guys are seeing, but I've spoken in the U.S., and I've also been able to speak in Israel and Sweden. And the fun thing about traveling internationally is I was able to pay for my husband to come with me, and then we added on some vacation days. So it's fun to travel a little bit on the company's dime. I also got to spend 4 weeks in Kenya as part of the IBM Corporate Service Corps, which was cool and also terrifying because my husband didn't come with me. So I was away from him, away from everything I knew for 4 weeks. So, Mark Zuckerberg, he's the founder of Facebook. He once asked Sheryl Sandberg, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And do that. And it's so scary to tackle those fears. Sometimes even just admitting what you're afraid of is scary. But I encourage you to think about that. What would you do if you weren't afraid? And then be bold and do it. So since I joined IBM, I feel like I've been a little bit improving my career. You can see here, these are all the teams that I've worked on. I've had teammates based in the U.S., Canada, Japan, Switzerland, and Sweden. I've been a Java developer, a test automation specialist, a web developer, a growth hacking engineer, and a developer advocate. So whenever my manager has said, you know what, Lauren, I think it's time to maybe grow your skills in a different way, I've said, yes, and let's do this. It's totally okay to say no. I have said no in the past, but I try not to say no out of fear or no because I don't feel like I have the given skill set. I've taken jobs that I haven't really felt qualified for, and it's been amazing. I've broadened my skills, and I've never gotten bored because I'm always stretching myself in a new way. So if you have the opportunity to try something new, go for it, even if you don't have all the required skills. So when I went on maternity leave, as I mentioned, for about 6.5 months, and I came back, and my manager said, I want you to come and work for IBM Graph. Now, I didn't know anything about graph databases, but I decided just to go for it. So all of that improvising kind of led me to where I am now, and I work on the IBM Graph team. So that's kind of my career stuff. So I'm going to transition over and talk a little bit about graph databases. Does anybody have any questions before I jump into the graph database stuff?
No.
Said a no? Okay, there's no pressure. Just want to make sure I wasn't rambling too much for you guys. Okay, so I've heard you guys have been working on Bluemix and you've been using different services, different databases, and I want to tell you a little bit about what graph databases are. So graph databases are a type of NoSQL database that focus not only on the data being stored, but also on the relationships between the data. So in relational databases, you have tables. So you might have a table about, where somebody lives, their address, and then if they're an employee, you might have a different table for information about who their manager is, that sort of thing. So have you guys worked with relational databases at all in this Bluemix Codathon?
No.
No? Okay. All right, so I won't do any more comparisons to that. So in graph databases, you have nodes and edges. So you can think of the nodes as your nouns. It's where you store information about your people, places, and things. You can think of the edges as your verbs. It's where you store information about the actions that connect your nodes. And when you have a property graph, you can actually store properties or information about your data in your nodes and edges. So you could have properties about this node and properties about this edge. So there are a couple things I really like about graph databases. The first is that you can model the data and the relationships just as they exist in real life without having to map them or abstract them to something else. So you don't have to break things up into tables in a way that's not really natural. If you have a node, if you have a noun, it can be a node. If you have a verb, it can be an edge. The other really great thing is that you can easily traverse your graph, which basically means to follow the connections between your nodes. So you don't have to do expensive joins to bring your data together to find the connections because your connections are already defined. So you can really easily look for patterns. So I'm going to give you an example. All right, can you guys still see my screen? Can you see the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if you guys have heard, the old saying that everybody's 6 degrees away from Kevin Bacon, which basically means that all actors are in some way connected to Kevin Bacon through some movie that they've done together. So the Bacon number is basically how many connections you have in order to get to Kevin Bacon. So I'm going to do an example. Do you guys have a favorite actor I can type in?
Anne Hathaway.
Anne Hathaway. There we go. I'm going to scroll down and it's calculating the Bacon number, so we'll see how connected Anne Hathaway is to Kevin Bacon.
You said he's a Footloose.
All right. So Anne Hathaway is 4 steps away. So we'll scroll down and we'll look at the graph. So we've got Kevin Bacon is connected to Bill Paxton through Apollo 13, connected to Leo through Titanic, connected to Joseph Gordon-Levitt through Inception, and then they're connected to Anne Hathaway through The Dark Knight Rises. So only 4 steps away.
That's cool.
So I'm so sorry. Are you guys asking a question or are you good?
No.
Okay. So our nodes here are actors like Kevin Bacon and Bill Paxton, and our movies are also nodes, Apollo 13 and Titanic. And then we might have these edges are not labeled, but they might be things like starred in. And since it's a property graph, we could store things about the actors and movies in the nodes. So we've got Kevin Bacon here. We could store information about him like his birthday. And then inside of the connection for started, we might store something about it like how much money he was paid to star in Apollo 13. So that's kind of the basic idea of a property graph. All right, so I'm going to jump back to PowerPoint. Who doesn't love watching PowerPoint? Okay. So let's talk about some use cases, why you might want to use a graph database versus other databases. So I like to think about it in terms of our nodes, which are our nouns, our people, places, and things. So starting with people, when people shop online, it can be incredibly helpful to see what other people like and purchase. So you might see a page like this at the bottom of an Amazon or a Target item page. So recommendations could be based on things like demographics, past purchase history, or social networks. And recommendation engines can be really efficiently run on graph databases because you can traverse through all the connections. Next up, places. So graph databases can be used to determine the shortest or fastest path. So you might have a node at all the different locations, like where an airport is, and then you might have connections showing flights you can take. So if we wanted to figure out how to go from Germany to Spain, then we could figure out the fastest path very easily using a graph database. And next up are things. So the Internet of Things includes things like our Snapchat glasses. I'm excited to see what those look like. Our tablets, our phones, our smartwatches. We live in a very smart, connected world. So storing data about our devices and all of their connections can be done quite easily in a graph database. And the last big use case, when you start thinking about people, places, and things, is unfortunately fraud. So when you need to search for patterns of fraudulent behavior, graph databases are a fantastic option. So if you think about if somebody charged your credit card $1,000, you'd probably catch on and say, whoa, that's fraudulent behavior. But let's say somebody decides to charge 500 credit cards $2 each. They might not notice. They may just say, oh, yeah, it looks fine. So you need to search for patterns like that. Using a graph database is a really great option. So we live in this connected world where we need to do more with our data than just access it. And graph databases can really help us efficiently store and gain insight into the connections and patterns of our data. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced you that graph databases are worth trying. So if you want to try a graph database, how are you going to do it? Well, Apache Tinkerpop is an open source graph computing framework that's very popular. But if you want to use Tinkerpop, you have to set up a whole set of technology. You might need to use Titan, Cassandra, Elasticsearch. It's kind of a pain. And then once you set it up, you need to keep it always running so that your app can always access the data. So it's kind of a pain. And that's where IBM Graph can come in. So IBM Graph is a service on Bluemix, which you guys have been using. It's a fully managed graph database service. You guys may have heard of software as a service as you've been working, and you can think of IBM Graph as Tinkerpop as a service. So there are 3 big perks to using IBM Graph. It's highly available, so your data is always accessible. It scales seamlessly, so if your app becomes the next big thing, it blows up, you don't have to worry about it. It's going to scale, and it's managed 24/7, so you don't have to worry about managing it yourself or upgrading it, that sort of thing. All right, so I'm going to jump over to a live demo. Live demos are always a little scary, but I'm going to feel bold and I'm going to go for it. So let's see what happens. All right. See? Okay. Okay, can you guys still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'm here on the Bluemix catalog, and I'm going to search for graph. And let's create the IBM Graph service. So here's the page describing the service with all the things we just talked about, that it's highly available, it's managed, it can scale seamlessly. I'm going to click Create. So what's nice here is we're not having to set up all that stuff I talked about with Tinkerpop and all that. It's just going to go ahead and create the database for me. So on this page, we could find our credentials and our connections. So if you wanted to set up a connection to your database from your app, you could do that here. I'm going to go ahead and open the database so we can browse it and explore it. So if you were trying this yourself, you could go through the Getting Started guide. You could look at the documentation. But I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in and load the sample data set. So this particular data set is for a music festival. Something like Bonnaroo, where you would have attendees, you would have bands, and you would have different venues. So once the data set is loaded, we'll see we actually have nodes for bands, venues, and attendees, and we've got edges that connect each of those. So it takes just a minute to load. Are you guys still with me?
Yeah.
Should have brought like some What's in Jeopardy questions. I feel totally unprepared here. Error. Okay, see, live demos are always scary. Registered endpoint. I've never had that happen. All right, I'm going to refresh the page and try again. And while we're waiting, let me see. I probably have another service created that I could just open up. So let me take a look. All right, so I think this should already have the database loaded. Okay, so here's our visualization of the model. So we've got the attendee who's got the edged bought ticket that connects to band. The band could perform at the venue, and the venue could advertise to the attendee. So this is our example database. And then let's run a sample query. So queries are written in the Gremlin query language. And this query visualizes all venues that are hosting folk performances. So I'm going to execute the query. And here we can see our query listed here. On the right, we've got the visualization, and then on the left is the actual JSON results. So we wanted to visualize all the venues that have folk performances. So let's take a look at this one. We've got a band here listed, Jamestown Revival, and their genre is folk. And then if we look at the venue, we can see they're playing at the Lucky Lounge. So we can click through and do the same thing. We've got with our other nodes. So we've got a venue, the Lady Bird Lake, and it's, you still hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And it's connected to bands like Declan McKenna. Whoops. So we could run another query. Let's run the one to list all performances that an attendee has bought tickets for. So if we take a look at the query, we can see we're searching for all vertices that have the name Jane Doe, so that's who we're checking for. We want to see who they bought tickets for, and we want to get the list of names. So I'm going to run this query and scroll up a little bit, and we can see that Jane Doe has actually bought a lot of tickets. It's going to be very busy. All right, so that is the basic of my demo. So we kind of covered a lot of things, so I just wanted to recap for you guys where we are. So fight imposter syndrome. Know that it exists if you hit it, and just keep in mind all of your accomplishments, all the awesome things you've done. If you've got it, flaunt it. So embrace what makes you different and use it to your advantage to be memorable. Improv your career. Say yes and. Make sure that you don't say no out of fear, and don't be afraid to take advantage of new opportunities. And then from the technical side, we want to remember to use a graph database when relationships matter in your data. All right, so that's the big stuff I have for you guys. Do you have any questions? Happy to answer questions about career or my experiences or graph databases or Bluemix or whatever.
I wanted to know what inspired you in your price finder ideas. Yes.
What inspired my price finder idea?
Yes.
I actually had a friend in college who told me that that was what she did. She actually had written a script to go and look up her items online, and I thought it was a really cool idea. So on when I get ready for Black Friday, I always have a list of all the items that I want to purchase, and so I thought, I think other people might find that helpful too.
What were your 4 patents for?
What are my patents for? Oh, that's a cool question. So I think one of the ones that's probably easiest to understand, when I go to conferences, I was doing social media for my team. So I would go and I would take pictures of people, demoing our products, that sort of thing. And IBM is very into not being sued. So anytime I wanted to post a picture online, I had to go and get that person's legal written permission. And I had to log it, and I had to keep track of who had signed the paper and make sure that they really had given permission. And if they were a minor, then I needed to get their parents' permission. And, it was hard to keep track of, okay, have I already gotten this person's permission or not? So what we did is we designed a system, an automated system that takes care of all of that for you. So as soon as you take a picture, it's linked up to your smartphone, your tablet. You can get somebody to sign right away that they give you permission or don't give you permission. Or if they want to defer, you can send them an email copy of the permission form, and they can send it back to you. And then it also uses facial recognition technology to keep track of, oh, this person already gave me permission, so I'm cleared. I can go ahead and post this. And it's also connected then into your social media. So you could, it would say, yes, you can post, you're cleared, everybody in this picture has been cleared, or no, you're still waiting on 2 people. So it's a whole automated system for taking care of that legal permission. I'm trying to think. The other ones are probably not as cool. They're a little more technical and boring.
Were you from Delaware?
Was that a question?
Are you from Delaware?
Am I from Delaware? No. The question was, am I from Delaware?
Yes.
Yeah. No. So I was born in New Bern, North Carolina, and my dad was military, so I actually have lived all over the U.S. I've lived in Arizona and Nebraska and Alabama, and then I went back to North Carolina. And then since I've been married, we've lived in Maryland, and now we're in Delaware, and we are getting ready to move to Pennsylvania. My parents actually live just outside of Fort Worth, so I have been to Texas a lot. I've spent only a little bit of time in Houston when we went out a cruise out of Houston, and then when I went to Great Hopper last year out of Houston. So I love Texas, but got to go where the jobs are for my husband, so I'm up north in Delaware.
Does your husband also work in the engineering field?
I can't hear you.
What way is it? This way? No? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Does your husband also work with IBM or with the engineering field?
He's a nuclear engineer, so it's a totally different type of engineering. He says he does spreadsheets all day. Yeah, so my daughter is going to be I worry for her because we're both very introverted engineers, but so far she's been lucky. She likes to just talk to people. We take her to Target and she thinks everybody wants to look at her and she's like, ah, and she just kind of loud talks at everyone. So hopefully she'll be a little more extroverted even though she's got two very introverted engineering parents.
Yeah, for your app. So many questions for your app. Oh. Well, actually, for us, we're having trouble loading stuff on Bluemix because every time we put the code, it says that there's like this thing that's missing, but I don't remember what it's called. But I don't know if
you're having trouble with your app, and then it trailed off a little.
Yeah, oh, okay. So for Bluemix, like the code, we are trying to input the code, but it doesn't let us run it because it says that it's missing like this file, but I don't know what it is.
So is the problem that when the app is trying to run, or is it like you're trying to like run the automated deploy and it says it's missing a file, or when are you hitting the error?
Like I was just like trying to input like regular hello world just to make sure that it was working, and it wouldn't let me. So I think it was like something with the setup, but I'm not sure.
I'd have to look at it. Unfortunately, I don't even know how to get you started without looking at it.
That's okay.
Is there a way, since you can use the graph, is there a way to connect one app to another with that application?
So the question is there a way to connect one app to another with Graph?
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess it depends on what you wanted to do. So if we think about the app living up here and then the data is down here. So if the app is your view and your data is down here, so let's say you are writing a restaurant app and you wanted to have your menu items were stored in your database. So you could do that. And then let's say you were writing, do you guys know about Grubhub? It's a way that you can order food online for a variety of stores. So maybe you had the Grubhub app and they wanted to access the menu as well. So then they could share a database that way if they wanted to. So if you wanted to share your data between two different apps, you could definitely do that. I'm trying to think of another example. Or let's say you had maybe just different apps for your employees. So you had maybe an app for, I'm trying to think. You had an app for like your employees who were going out on the field to do something, and then a different app for people when they're at their desk, and that you still wanted them to access the same data, then you could definitely use the same database. Does that make sense?
Yes, it did.
Okay. You guys are so small on my screen. I'm trying to read your facial expressions, but it's hard.
How many patterns do you have?
How many what?
How many patents do you have, like, total?
I have 4 that have been issued, and then I've got other invention ideas that IBM said we think that they're not worth patenting. We don't want to spend the money to patent them, but we think it would be useful to publish them so that other people can't patent them. And I've got several of those. Roughly 6-ish. I'm not sure.
How much do patents cost to make?
That is a really good question. Because I work at IBM and they want to do lots of patents, it doesn't cost me anything. I think IBM invests a lot in patent lawyers who will go and they'll do really in-depth prior art searches to make sure that nobody else has already patented it. And then the lawyers also take our ideas and they write it up into IBM or into lawyer speak. And so they kind of legalize it, and they take our ideas and they make them very hard to understand. And so IBM spends a lot of money doing that. But I don't have a hard number for you. The nice thing about if you go work at a company like IBM that really cares about getting patents, they'll give you a bonus when you get the patent. So I make a little money every time a patent gets filed, which is cool. Get extra bonus money for doing my job.
Hi, Lauren. This is Claudette. I have a question. With you being a new mom, how do you find it balancing your work and being a new mom?
So far, I feel like I've been really lucky because I've been able to go back just 2 days a week. I stay really hyper-focused when I'm at work. I don't know if I put extra pressure on myself, but I feel like, okay, when I leave today, I've got to have something accomplished because I've got to make progress. So I stay really hyper-focused when I'm at work, and then when I'm not, I don't check my email, I don't do anything, and I try to just be really present with my daughter. What I've noticed is that I do a really good job of turning off work when I'm at home, but then on the days when I'm going to work, I tend to wake up the night before when I'm trying to sleep at night, and I start thinking about work. So I can tell my brain is starting to kick on, and I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to solve this problem? So far, it's been okay. I've only been back to work a month. Like I mentioned earlier, being able to pump at home is just huge. So I feel like I'm still able to give that to her. And I don't know, it's kind of working.
What advice do you have for someone who's about to go to college?
Oh, I would say, well, first, don't be afraid. So if a class looks really hard, don't let that, scare you off. Go for it. If you don't understand something, go to office hours, ask TAs, get help, because they're usually more than willing to help you. And then have fun. So I did the marching band at NC State, which I know it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to be in the band. No, I know it's not. Okay. But it worked out really well for me because I'm the type of person that I'm just going to study, I'm going to work really hard, and I'm very focused. So my marching band time was guaranteed time, a couple times a week where I was going to socialize with my friends. It was guaranteed exercise. I know people will say marching band isn't exercise, but I was moving around. It was guaranteed time to socialize and move around a little bit. So whether that's through, doing a sport casually with your friends or taking a PE class, making time to enjoy college is always great.
What are some things that you do to boost your confidence?
What are some things I do to boost my confidence?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a really great TED Talk that talks about doing the Superwoman pose. Has anybody show this to you?
No.
No. Okay. So you're going to think I'm super goofy, but I'm going to do it anyway. So basically, the Superwoman pose is to go like this, and you stand up, but you can't really see me, but you stand like this for a couple minutes. Oh, you're going to do it. I love it. Okay. So you stand up for a few minutes like this before you give a big talk or a presentation, and it actually is proven to boost your confidence. So you put your chest up and you think. And I do it. And a lot of my presentations, I don't have a webcam. So when I'm presenting virtually, sometimes I will stand up and I will do it. So whenever I have a big talk, you'll see me before, and I will be doing that pose. And the other thing I like to do is I have a LinkedIn profile. I guess this is embarrassing, but this is what I do. I have a LinkedIn profile, and I put every accomplishment I have, I put it on there. And sometimes I go and I just read my LinkedIn profile, and I go, yeah, I've accomplished stuff. So just acknowledging that you have done things that are awesome, I think really helps.
I just want to see your daughter. I mean, like, she seems cute and all. If you could show her.
I can't hear.
Is your daughter there?
She is, but she's in bed. So we get her up at 6 every morning. So she goes to bed at 6:30 at night. She's already asleep.
Do you know how to integrate third-party APIs into Bluemix?
They wanted me to talk about that. I don't think I've ever done it. It should be really possible, like if you wanted to incorporate like a dictionary or something like that. But I don't have firsthand experience doing it.
No more questions.
No more questions?
Oh, no questions.
For the winning team, since you've been to GHC, what would be your tips or recommendation for them? How can they make the best out of the conference?
What was the question?
Oh. Since you've been to Grace Hopper,
Yes.
for the winning team, what's your tip on how they can make the best out of the conference?
Oh, how to make the best out of the Grace Hopper conference. Go to stuff. There are so many great topics. So what I always do is the night before, I usually sit in bed and I look at all the different topics and I say, okay, what am I most interested in? And I always try to pick it out for myself before I go and meet people for the day. So I try to, I don't want to pick something just because, my friend's interested in that. Definitely pick out stuff that you're interested in and go to a mix. There are career topics, go to those, they're great. Go to technical topics so that you're learning something new, that's great. And then try to meet new people. It's incredible, you'll just sit down and be like, oh, I'm sitting next to somebody from Microsoft, that's awesome, let me talk to you. Or, oh, I'm sitting next to somebody from Google, let me talk to you. If you want to get an internship or a job, it's amazing. Get your resume ready before you go. And then go and shop around and talk to different people. Now, the career fair is amazing. There is so much free stuff. There's no other conference like it for picking up free stuff. So be sure you've got space. You guys are local, so you don't have to do this, but I always make sure I've got lots of luggage space empty for when I come home. And even if you're not looking for a job, a lot of times the recruiters won't give you stuff unless you give them a resume. So bring a resume anyway and just load up on free stuff. Have a good time. And don't miss the keynotes because they're amazing. And if there's a talk by Nora Denzel, even if you're not interested in it, go see Nora Denzel. She's amazing.
Oh. So, I have a resume, but, I'm completely new at, what is this called? Coding, yes. But I'm, completely new at coding, and then that would be, wouldn't you have to have somewhat of experience?
They probably are looking for, it depends where you want to go and what level you are. So they're not expecting a high school student to have a lot of coding experience. So, and in college, they're expecting you to have some coding experience, but maybe not necessarily work experience. So I would just go and talk to people, see what happens. They're very welcoming and really want to get people. So I would just go and talk to people.
Okay. And what do you think is the best way to get started on coding, like step one?
Step one. So my step one was going to college. So I took programming classes in college. But there are so many great resources online that you can probably get started. When I had to learn JavaScript, I read a book called JavaScript, The Good Parts. And then I went to W3 Schools. It's a website, and they've got a ton of resources on how to learn JavaScript. So that's how I learned JavaScript. And they probably have other tutorials on basic coding, on Java, that sort of thing. But I would definitely check out W3 Schools and see if they've got a topic you're interested in. What's happening?
Oh, I have a question. If you weren't good at computer science, what else would you do?
I'm gonna need one more. I'm gonna need another.
If you weren't good at computer science, what else would you do?
If I was not doing computer science, what else would I do? I've actually thought about this because when I was in college, I kept thinking, okay, if I switch majors, what am I going to pick? And I could never come up with anything. So what I think I would do is I would love to be, I would love to work for a church and work on their women's outreach programs. I'm passionate about empowering women to be the best that they can be. And I would love to work on programs like that. So I'm currently trying to get Embrace Grace started at my local church, and Embrace Grace is a program that helps women who are young and pregnant find resources and just kind of get started, and encourages them to be great moms or to put their babies up for adoption. And so I think that's what I would love to do, is I would love to work on a way to empower and encourage women. I'm so impressed with these questions. You guys are asking all sorts of different questions.
May we have your contact information?
Yes. I will give it to Claudette, or Claudette can give it to you, and I will post these slides up on Twitter, and you guys can feel free to contact me through Twitter or my email address, and we'll make that happen.
Can I ask a question? Who were some people that you looked up to while you're in college and stuff?
Some people that I looked up to while I was in college. Well, I looked up to my TAs because they had succeeded and they knew what they were doing and they were helping me get it together. When I was in grad school, I really looked up to my advisor. Her name was Lori Williams, and she had a PhD, and she walked around campus in her hot pink high heels, and I thought she was just amazing. I was so impressed with her because she was so well respected. She had done a lot of really great research, and she continues to do a lot of great research. So she's well respected in the field. She had a family, and she was fashionable. And so I just thought she was amazing. So, you know, I guess I would encourage you guys to find local people on campus that you think, oh, I want to be like her, I want to be like him, and talk to them and get advice from them.
Thanks a lot, Lauren. And we'll definitely give them your contact information. We'll put it in the Slack. Consider Lauren to be one of your mentors if you have any questions that you think of after sessions, and after giving you your contact information, you can ask her.
Thank you. Thank you. Great questions. It was great talking with you guys. Bye.
Bye.